I'm Megan, and this is my theory of comprehension presentation. First, we'll go over the principles, and then we'll end with my theory of comprehension. So for the first principle, we had 3 tasks to complete. The first was an auditory distraction activity, in which we attempted to read a passage while speech was being presented. Secondly, we did a visual distraction activity, in which we attempted to read a passage that would disappear at random. And the third task was a working memory activity, in which we read a short story and tried to remember the last word of each sentence. So my comprehension varied slightly while doing these activities. For the auditory distraction activity, I found that concentrating on the text was very difficult. I couldn't focus on what I was reading, but instead wanted to focus on the audio that I was hearing. In result, I found myself trying to reread almost every sentence of the article. For the visual distraction activity, I found myself rushing to read as much as possible before the text would disappear. When the text would reappear, I would then have to spend time trying to find where I had last left off. This was very distracting for me, as I would often catch myself panicking about when the text was going to disappear next. For both of these activities, I would definitely say my attention was the cognitive process most affected. The distractions present were significant enough for me to be unable to comprehend the text. I think my comprehension during the working memory activity was slightly better when compared to the auditory and visual distraction activities. This activity story was very simple to follow, and it was probably a children's book. I did, however, find myself struggling on a couple of the quiz questions due to the fact that I was focusing on remembering specific words rather than the content of the story. Despite that, though, I still considered it easier to manage than the other 2 activities. In principle number 2, we were to read the 2 bear and fly summaries and then compare our comprehension of them. So I had difficulties understanding the first story due to the writer's struggle with syntax. The sentence structure was not very easy to follow. There also weren't a lot of identifiers used, so I had trouble understanding who was doing what at times. On the plus side, though, the vocabulary used was very basic, so that helped assist me in trying to piece together the story. In the second story, I found lots of repetitive words used, such as seas and spots, swatter, a fly swatter, and try to tries. There were some misspelled words every now and then, and improper tense was sometimes used. When comparing my comprehension, I would say I understood the second story more than the first story. I think it was easier to look past the mistakes with more identifiers and descriptive words present. Although it was easier, I still wouldn't consider it the easiest thing to read. I would say the cognitive process most affected during this activity was language, seeing as I had a very hard time following the language that was used. For principle number 3, we had to read the first half of Emma Watson's speech about feminism, and then we watched the second half. For comprehension, I found that reading the speech was quite easy, and I was able to understand everything. I did reread a couple parts to make sure I had a solid grasp on the topic, but overall I found the vocabulary and structure very reader-friendly. However, I did enjoy viewing the speech slightly more. I think this is mostly because I was able to focus on what she was saying while also having my own thoughts on the subject. I also very much enjoyed being able to see Emma Watson's emotion and body language, and I think this may help make her words more impactful on the audience. I would say the cognitive processes most affected during this activity was memory, as I was trying to remember certain statistics and other things. For principle number 4, we were to read an astrophysics article and a reading comprehension article, and then determine our understanding of each of them. For comprehension, the astrophysics articles I struggled with quite a bit. I had very little previous knowledge on the subject and wasn't very interested in it. I found myself rereading quite often to try to understand what the article was saying, but ultimately I found that I just didn't have the base knowledge needed to understand the vocabulary used. The cognitive process most affected here was attention and reasoning. Attention because my interest level was very low and I became very easily distracted, and reasoning because I was able to put together the meaning of the article. I found the reading comprehension article much easier to comprehend. I had some prior knowledge of the subject and was much more interested in it. It also helped that the vocabulary was within my knowledge base. Overall, I just found this article much easier. Okay, so when trying to make a theory of comprehension, it may help to know the definition of comprehension. So according to the Rand article we read, comprehension is simultaneously extracting and constructing meaning through interaction and involvement with written language. And there's 3 parts that make up comprehension, and those are the reader and what abilities, knowledge, and experiences they have, the text, which can be printed or electronic, and then the activity, which is what goes on while reading, and it's the purposes and processes associated with it. So my theory that makes comprehension easier includes these things. Start early. Comprehension starts very young and grows with age, so any extra support at home before school is very helpful. Having a well-developed vocabulary knowledge will help the child understand what he or she is reading. Also, having some background knowledge about the subject can help with comprehension. I found that having the text displayed in multiple ways helped me understand the content more, so if I was able to have visual processes and auditory processes working together, comprehension was overall easier. I also found that when the text is structured in a reading-friendly way, I spent less time focusing on piecing together the information and more comprehending on what was being said. And lastly, I think a child's interest level is a huge part of comprehension. If they are able to relate to the matter or find the story very captivating, they are less likely to be distracted and will often comprehend the text much more quickly. So overall, I think a child would benefit from putting all these aspects together.